safety and starting position. Machine setup. The foot plate can be adjusted so that the client's whole foot can fit onto the plate. In doing this, you need to pull the lever up as shown and move it forwards or backwards. Similarly, the seat can also be adjusted forwards or backwards depending on the client's height. Weight plates can be added to either side of the machine on the rails as shown. We have a lower rails and also upper rails, which you see here, whereby additional weight can also be stacked. Now let's look at the starting position of the 45-degree leg press. Here you see the client will sit into the machine as shown. They will do a slight repetition by pushing up and locking the weight plate out and simultaneously releasing the safety rails. Releasing the safety rails will unlock the machine and allow for full range of movement. Now let's look at a lateral view of the starting position. Here we can see the client's head and shoulders are flat against the seat. The client is also grasping the handles and has slightly bent knees. From a posterior view, we can see the feet are about hip width apart and in the middle of the plate. Technique cues. Slowly lower the weight plate back towards the body. Here we lower until we can achieve a 90-degree position at the ankle, knee and hip joint. Once this position is achieved, the client will then push forwards, pushing through the heels. They should also look to maintain a slight bend in the knees and avoid locking the knees out. Push through the heels and ensure the heels remain flat at all times. Also notice the whole foot is on the foot plate, creating maximum force. You also want to maintain alignment through the knees and toes and have a straight position there. And maintain contact with the head and shoulders on the seat. To finish the movement, pull the safety rails back in, and this will activate the safety racks to re-rack the weight in a safe position. Let's have a look at correct breathing techniques. And as the weight is lowered towards the body, we should inhale through the nose and then exhale through the mouth as the weight is pushed back out. This process should be repeated for 4 repetitions. Now let's have a look at the 45-degree leg press in normal speed. Let's have a look at some common technique errors in the leg press. And common technique error number 1 is knee valgus, or inwards movement of the knees. As can be seen in this side-by-side comparison, the knees should remain vertically aligned with the ankles at all times. Inwards movement at the knees may cause stress on that knee joint and result in injury. Knee valgus is generally the result of weakness in the hip and gluteal muscles, specifically the gluteus minimus, medius, and the tensor fasciae latae. Common technique error number 2, pushing the head forwards. As can be seen in this comparison, the head and back of the shoulders should remain in contact with the seat at all times. Pushing the head forwards is something which is seen commonly in the 45-degree leg press, and it should be avoided as it places stress on the neck. The PT should encourage the client to have their head back against the seat. Common technique error number 3. Locking out the knees. If you look at this comparison, you can see that in the correct version of this exercise, the client maintains slight bend of the knees at the finished position. In the incorrect picture, the client's knees are visibly locked out and straightened, almost hyperextending. It is important that the client maintains a slight bend in the knees as to not place too much stress on the knee joint. This may cause injury. Some exercise instruction methods for when the client is locking the knees out. And we can see here the PT is standing in and around the weight plate. When the PT notices that the client is locking the knees out, they will step in and provide a cue as to where the exercise should finish. This will also indicate depth for the client and allow them to maintain a slight bend in the knees at the finished position. Let's take a look at some spotting techniques for the 45-degree leg press. And we can see here the PT is positioned to the side and they are assisting the client in pushing the weight up. Now let's take a look at an exercise analysis of the 45-degree leg press. And firstly, the eccentric phase. This phase occurs when the weight plate is lowered back towards the body. Here the target muscles are relaxing or lengthening. Concentric phase. This occurs when the weight is pushed back to the starting position. Here the target muscles are shortening or contracting. Now let's take a look at a joint action muscle analysis of the concentric phase only. And firstly, the joints. As the weight is pressed up, we see movement at the ankle joint. This is passive movement. We also see movement at the knee joint, as well as movement at the hip joint. When looking at joint actions, at the ankle joint, we can see ankle plantar flexion, and this is passive movement once again. We can once again see a movement at the knee joint, which is a knee extension. And finally, the movement at the hip joint is hip extension. When analysing target muscles, at the ankle joint for ankle plantar flexion, we have contraction of the gastrocnemius and the soleus, or the calf muscles. For the knee joint and knee extension, contraction of the rectus femoris, vastus lateralis, vastus medialis, and vastus intermedius, or the quadricep muscles. And finally, for the hip joint and hip extension, contraction of the gluteus maximus, as well as the biceps femoris, semimembranosus, and semitendinosus, or the hamstring muscles. The 45-degree leg press.